الحمد لله رب العالمين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وسلم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. Praise Allah, the Lord of everything in existence. Testify that He's the only one deserving of worship, and we testify that Muhammad is a servant and His messenger. We ask Allah to bless the Messenger Muhammad, to elevate his mention and rank, and to shower him with protection and grace, along with his family and his righteous followers to the last day. We ask Allah to teach us what benefits us and allow us to benefit from the things that we learn and to increase us in knowledge. Alhamdulillah, we have another session of prophetic stories, illustrations of life, where we're covering certain events from the life and times of the Messenger Muhammad and trying to extract lessons and morals that we can apply in our daily lives. What happened last week was that the audio was cut off 15 minutes into the lecture. So basically, we don't have that part of the lecture. And also, so this was a good thing, because I made a mistake last week. So I have to own up to the mistake. I kind of mixed things up. In the very end of the lecture, when I was describing who Umama is. So last week, we basically spoke about an aspect of the Prophet's life which has to do with his grandchildren. We had spoken about his male grandchildren, Al-Hassan and Al-Hussein, briefly. We spoke about his daughter Fatima. But we said within the family of the Prophet, Ahlul Bayt are not limited to those individuals, although those are the ones that carry his name and carry his legacy, because those individuals survived. Whereas the rest of the Prophet's children, ﷺ, passed away. So I want to make that clarification. And today what I wanted to do was dedicate this to who Umama was and who her parents were. So Umama was the daughter of Zainab. The daughter of Zainab. Zainab was the eldest of the Prophet's children, alayhi salatu wassalam. So, and we had mentioned the children of the Prophet last week. We said the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam had 6 children from his wife Khadija, 4 females and 2 males. The first one was Al-Qasim, and that was where he got his kunya from. He was called Abu Al-Qasim. Al-Qasim passes away in his early years. Then he has Zainab. So Zainab is the eldest of the daughters. And then after Zainab is Ruqayya. And after Ruqayya is Fatima. And then Kulthum. The scholars have differed whether Fatima was the youngest or Kulthum was the youngest. Not a big deal. And then he had the other son, Abdullah. Somewhere in between those children. And Abdullah also passes away. Abdullah's nickname was At-Tahir. So I have a line of poetry here that we can mention. It says, وَوَلَدُهُ مِنْهَا خَلَى إِبْرَاهِيمُ فَالْأَوَّلُ الْقَاسِمُ حَازَ التَّكْرِيمُ. The children of the Prophet are all from her except for Ibrahim, whom he has later on in his life, right before his death. He has Ibrahim from the Egyptian woman called Maria. Maria the Coptic woman, who was a gift that was sent to him by the king of Egypt. So the Prophet had, in the end of his ministry, he had sent letters and messages to the kings of his time. And one of them was Al-Muqawqis, which was the king of Alexandria at that time. And this man received the letter, or received the message of the Prophet in a very respectful way. And he sent back gifts. And from these gifts were this lady, whose name is Maria, who the Prophet ﷺ took to himself. Al-Awwal al-Qasim. So Al-Qasim is the first one of the children of the Prophet ﷺ. وَزَيْنَبٌ رُقَيَّةٌ وَفَاطِمَةٌ وَأُمُّ كُلْثُومٍ لَهُنَّ خَاتِمَةٌ. So Zainab comes after that, then Ruqayyah, then Fatima, and then finally Kulthum is the last one of them all. They all lived until the Prophet received the message, meaning they all lived in the time of Islam. Because we know the Prophet lived for 40 years before he became a messenger. And he got married at 25, so clearly he has his children in the early period of his life. But once he became a messenger, these children, the daughters, the 4 daughters, had reached Islam. They embraced Islam, they accepted the message, and this is very important in the life of the Prophet. And we can dedicate a lot of time onto that. The fact that the first people that accepted his message was his wife, Khadija, and her children. and whoever was in that household. So you had the four female daughters, and then you had Ali, who had been adopted or sponsored or fostered by the Prophet. You had Zayd ibn Muhammad, or Zayd ibn Haritha, more accurately, but this is the adopted son of the Prophet. And these were the early believers, and then the Prophet's best friend, Abu Bakr. So this tells you that the house was a united front. They didn't really have any differences within the house, and that's huge. Now, this doesn't mean that he was biased, as in he only shared the message with his family. He shared the message with everyone, but the very first people that accepted it were his household. Once the Prophet became a messenger, Abdullah was born to him, and he named Abdullah after his own father. And he used to have other nicknames like At-Tayyib and At-Tahir, the pure one or the good smelling one. And the mother of all of these children is Khadija, may Allah be pleased with her, who was the wife of the Prophet, his internal support, the one who believed in him in the very early days. And we spoke about her in the first sessions here in our series. So as far as Al-Qasim, it says he passes away either right before the ministry of the Prophet begins or right after it. But basically, he only lived for a very short period of time. And then he says, وَالطَّاهِرُ الطَّيِّبُ عَبْدُ اللَّهِ وَقِيلَ كُلُّ اسْمٍ لِفَرْدٍ زَاهِ. So these two nicknames are nicknames for Abdullah, and they're not two other children. Because some people think he had another child named Tayyib and another child named Tahir. But that's incorrect. So these were nicknames for Abdullah specifically. And then it moves on, and it says, وَالْكُلُّ فِي حَيَاتِهِ ذَاقُ الْحِمَامِ وَبَعْدَهُ فَاطِمَةٌ بِنَصْفِ عَامٍ. Every single one of them tasted death in his lifetime. And Fatima was the last to survive him, and she passed away after him by 6 months. And we had briefly spoken about that before. So what we wanted to concentrate on is the fact that there are other people in the family of the Prophet that sometimes, unfortunately, don't get much attention. And this is very interesting because the Prophet gave him a lot of attention in his lifetime. We're kind of going to repeat what we said last week in a very quick way, but I wanted to focus on the mistake that I made. So the mistake that I made was, again, to own up to it, was I said, Umama, her grandfather, I said by accident, was Abu Jahl. You guys remember that? That's incorrect. Umama's grandfather from her father's side is not Abu Jahl. So Umama was the daughter of Zainab, and her father was named Abu al-As ibn al-Rabi'. Abu al-As ibn al-Rabi' from the family of Abd Shams. So a Meccan family, and definitely from the top people in Mecca. And we're going to speak about Abu al-As, her father, and we're going to speak about her mother in a few moments. So Zainab. Zainab is the first daughter of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and she's called Zainab al-Kubra. Zainab, the senior one. And she was married to Abu al-As ibn al-Rabi' prior to the Prophet's ministry, prior to him becoming a messenger. Now, when the Prophet did receive the message, she believed, but Abu al-As did not. Now, there was something very interesting as a dynamic in Mecca that had happened. The other daughters of the Prophet were married to not Abu Jahl's sons, Abu Lahab's son. Who's Abu Lahab? The uncle of the Prophet, who really had a great relationship with him before the Quran came down. Abu Lahab loved the messenger. And in fact, when Muhammad was born, Abu Lahab became so happy he freed some of the servants that used to work for him. And they say he used to look like him. The Prophet ﷺ looked like Abu Lahab physically. So Abu Lahab is not like an ugly looking monster, but his behavior and his actions were terrible. So the two daughters of the Prophet, which is Ruqayya and Umm Kulthum, were both married to the sons of Abu Lahab. They were both married to the sons of Abu Lahab. But when the Prophet became a messenger and he announced that, Abu Lahab put pressure on his sons. The sons are called Utbah and Utaybah. Utbah and Utaybah. Abu Lahab put pressure on them and told them, divorce Muhammad's daughters. So this is a huge event in the life of the Prophet, where now not only is he being affected, people are talking about him, but now his family is being affected. And we hear that in the enmity that the Quraysh have. So the Quraysh had multiple strategies of how we're going to pressure this man. We're going to talk to him directly, we're going to talk to his family, but now we're going to ruin the lives of some of his children. And this was huge in Jahiliyyah, that you basically would just cut off family ties like that. But that's what they were doing. And I've spoken about that in quite some length in the series that was titled Building the Foundation. So you can go back to that, but I just wanted to repeat that here. Now what's interesting is that Utaybah remains a disbeliever till he dies. Utbah later on becomes Muslim. But the fact of the matter is, they both divorced and separated from the daughters of the Prophet ﷺ. So that's where my confusion was last week when I said who's who. Now, Abi al-As, Ibn al-Rabi' did not accept Islam. But he also did not divorce his wife Zaynab. And this was again early on in Islam, where the regulations of marriage were not yet institutionalized. So no one can come up with this and say, well, here we go. In the life of the Prophet, we have evidence that Muslim women can marry non-Muslim men. This is very important, but that's the key of getting the history down. When this event took place, we said he got married to her before the ministry of the Prophet began. Once the Prophet was commissioned, Zaynab embraced Islam. The marriage regulations of a Muslim woman not being allowed to marry a non-Muslim man had not been institutionalized yet. Now, Quraysh pressured Abu al-As to divorce his wife as well. So Abu Lahab pressured his sons and they complied. But he refused. So he was a noble man. He says, I'm not going to go play your dirty game. You guys have beef with him. What does this have to do with his daughter? Why am I going to mess her life up? So now this continues to be the case all the way until the Battle of Badr. What happens in the Battle of Badr? Battle of Badr takes place in the second year after Hijrah. So 15 years after the ministry of the Prophet begins. And Abu al-As came out with Quraysh fighting the Muslims. He was one of the members of that army, and he was taken as a POW, a prisoner of war. This is where the story gets very interesting. People from Quraysh sent ransom money to free some of their noble men, because we know there was 70-some prisoners from Quraysh. So Zaynab, may Allah be pleased with her, she sent her own jewelry, she sent her necklace as ransom for her husband. She's still married to him. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he saw it, he got affected emotionally, because this was the necklace of Khadijah, and it reminded him of Khadijah. So again, what we learn here is these things, although you may say, well, what value does this thing have? It's got this sentimental value. The Prophet never forgot about Khadijah, all the hard times she lived with him through, and all the support that she gave. So much so that after a battle, he would recognize the honor of Khadijah, and out of his honoring Khadijah, would accept that as ransom. And then he makes an announcement and he says, "O Muslims, Zaynab sent this as ransom for her husband. You guys can accept that ransom and let her husband go back to her, or and give her back her ransom, simply because why? To honor her. Or you can keep the ransom money. It's completely yours." Now, what happened was, the Muslims agreed. So this is again the Prophet not utilizing his authority and saying, "This is my daughter, you guys better do what I ask you to do." He says, he consulted with them. "If you guys feel like you want to do this, I'm just letting you know, this is from Zaynab." And he told them the story, and they released him without any ransom. Now the Prophet made a deal with Abil As. He says, when you get back to Mecca, send my daughter back, because it is no longer allowed for my daughter to be with you in marriage. Send my daughter back. And Abu al-As honored that promise. So he goes back to Mecca. Now again, if he's an evil person, he's like, whatever, man. Sure, that was in the middle of the battle, but I am free to do whatever I want to do. This is my wife. I'm not going to let her go. But he honored his promise to the Prophet. He goes and he sends her back in the most honorable of ways. Now, something interesting happens later on. So right before Fath Mecca. What time does Fath Mecca happen? The 8th year of the migration. So we're talking about 6 years after this event. Abu al-As, again, the typical Meccan lifestyle is business and caravans. He had a caravan and he had went up north to buy and sell. And coming back, a group of Muslims that the Prophet had sent out to basically collect back money that was stolen from the Muslims in Mecca. So he told them, the instruction is clear. Whenever you see caravans from Mecca coming, you guys are to confiscate that, because that's really your money. Because remember, when the Muslims migrated to Mecca, they left all their wealth. In fact, they had to pay ransom to be let gone without being killed. So he told them, compensate this money. So they go and they compensate the caravan. And Abu al-As runs away. Where does he run away to? He runs away to Medina. Now Medina is on the way, because Sham is up north, Medina is right in the middle. He goes inside to Medina and he finds his wife's house. He goes to Zainab's house at night. This is amazing. If you think about it, how does this thing happen? How would he be familiar with finding her? It happens. In the morning, the Prophet ﷺ is leading the community in Fajr Salah, and then they hear an announcement. Well, right before that, sorry. What happens at night? He comes knocking on her door and he says, I seek refuge with you. I need your protection. Basically, they're after me. They took my caravan and now they're going to be after me, meaning I'm in trouble. So I'm running away here. I'm a what? What is it called when you have a criminal on the run? What is that individual called? A fugitive. I'm a fugitive. I need you to give me amnesty. This is the concept of ijara. Or وَإِنْ أَحَدٌ مِّنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ اسْتَجَارَكَ فَأَجِرْهُ حَتَّى يَسْمَعَ كَلَامَ اللَّهِ. It's mentioned in the Quran, when one of the disbelievers seeks refuge with you until he's able to listen to the message, then give him refuge. Give him amnesty until he hears the message. Meaning, you're not going to pressure him into anything and you're not going to abuse him in any way, shape, or form. So she gave him amnesty. She says, I'll protect you. When the Prophet led Salah, Zainab came up from the women's side and she shouted and she says, "O people, I have given amnesty to Abi al-As ibn al-Rabi'." So the Prophet ﷺ says, I had never heard about this before this. Meaning, I'm listening, I'm hearing this for the first time, just like you guys are listening to it for the first time. That's something very important. Because somebody may say, what? Well, this was a conspiracy. The Prophet is trying to emotionally blackmail the community by playing this game. He didn't even know what was happening. Abu al-As came directly to Zainab, and Zainab gave him amnesty. And then he says, this becomes a regulation in Islam, by the way. He says, and for the Muslims, if the least of the Muslims give refuge to someone and gives protection to someone, the rest of the Muslims are commanded to honor that. This is huge. You have a fugitive running away, and any random Muslim, not a president, not a government official, not a congressman, any random Muslim in the community says, I give this individual protection, and the rest of the Muslims have to honor that. So that's mentioned in our books of law, in the books of fiqh. How we must honor the contracts that any Muslim gives. Even if it's a woman, yes, this was a woman. Even if the person doesn't have any political role, yes. Because Muslims are to honor each other. Even when a Muslim makes a promise, I have to honor their promise. Then the Prophet goes to his daughter and gives her instruction. He says, my daughter, honor him and take care of him, but do not be intimate with him, because it is not allowed for you guys to be intimate. So honor him as a guest, but do not be intimate with him because he is not lawful for you. Now, the story doesn't end. The Prophet sends to the group of people that had confiscated the caravan, and he says, you guys know what this man's status is in comparison to us, what his relationship to my family is. And you guys took his wealth. So if you guys treat him generously and return his wealth back, I would really appreciate that. But if you guys refuse to, then this is your lawful spoils of war. Again, consulting them, not giving them unilateral decisions. He says, you guys deserve it if you take it. If you want to take it, it's completely yours. But if you return back his wealth, I would definitely appreciate it. They said, rather, O Messenger of God, we will return it all. And they did not leave anything with them. They returned every single thing that was in their possession. Then he goes back to Mecca. Abi al-As ibn al-Rabi' goes back to Mecca. And because he was a representative of Quraysh, again, when they go on these caravans, it's not all his money. He announces in Mecca, I am back. Everybody who has money with me, whoever has invested in this caravan, come and pick up your money. Come and pick up your wealth. Come and pick up your merchandise. And everybody comes and he gives everybody back there what belongs to them. Then he says, O Quraysh, does anyone have anything outstanding with me? Do I owe any of you anything? And they said, no. You are the most trustworthy. May God reward you. So he tells them, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. He said the testimony of faith. He says the statement of faith, I testify that there is nothing worthy of worship besides God, the one true God, and I testify that Muhammad is a servant and his messenger. And then he says, he explains to them what just happened. He says, the only reason that I did not embrace Islam in the presence of Muhammad is I didn't want you guys to think that I was going to take your money away. Because that's what people will think. Again, oh, here we go. This was a conspiracy. He's going to plot with his father-in-law. He goes to his wife. They keep our money. And this was planned ahead of time. That's how people are. People are like very weird as far as thinking the worst of others instead of giving them the benefit of the doubt. Then he migrated to Medina. And the Prophet ﷺ allowed him to live back with his daughter Zainab. And they did not need to renew their marriage contract. That's another very interesting regulation in Islam. So if people were married, let's say we have a random couple. We have Jessica and Tom. And they were married before Islam. They were not Muslim. They embrace Islam. We don't require them to make an Islamic marriage because they were already married. That's something important. So this was the process that the Prophet ﷺ took. He honored the contracts that the people had prior to their conversion to Islam. He did not say, you guys have to change everything. And this is one of the evidences that the scholars use for that. And she lived with him for the rest of her life. And then Zainab, may Allah be pleased with her, passes away in the 8th year. So very shortly after, we're talking about right after this event, Zainab passes away. And the Prophet ﷺ used to love her dearly. And she was the mother of Umama, who is the star of our lecture. And Umama was the one the Prophet carried on his shoulders. And this is the lesson that we had covered last week. And then Umama was married to Ali. Ali ibn Abi Talib marries Umama. So when Umama becomes an adult, Ali ibn Abi Talib marries her. Right after the passing of his wife Fatima. Because remember, Fatima passes away when? 6 months after the Prophet's passing. So then Ali approaches Umama, who is what? The niece of his wife. Another thing about Umama is that her father was the nephew of Khadija. One may ask, how did Zainab get the necklace of Khadija? It's because that was the gift that Khadija gave them when they got married. this is how the story is all connected. And Khadija said, this is, so basically the brother of Khadija, the sister of Khadija, her son is Abil As. So she gave them this as a wedding gift. So the Prophet now is honoring all that history when he accepted that as ransom. And of course, he didn't end up taking it. He sent it back to her. So that's the story of who? Zaynab. Let's go to Abu al-As now and speak about Abu al-As for a little bit, the father of Umama. And Abu al-As, this is his full name. So last week, of course, I had a mistake in his lineage. Abu al-As ibn al-Rabi' ibn Abd al-Uzza ibn Abd Shams ibn Abd Manaf ibn Qusay al-Qurashi. And he is the husband of Zaynab, the daughter of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What was he known as? He was known as Al-Amin. Have you guys heard this description before? Al-Amin, the trustworthy. That's the nickname of the Prophet. This man among Quraysh was known as Al-Amin as well. And the Prophet speaks about him in other narrations, and he says, this man was truthful. When he spoke to me, he was honest with me. And when he promised me something, he fulfilled his promise. And we saw that when Quraysh was pressuring him to divorce Zaynab, he refused to comply with their pressure. We spoke about how he basically embraces Islam, the story of him embracing Islam. And that was in the 6th year of Hijrah. That was in the 6th year of the Hijrah. So we had said 8th. So he lived with her for 2 more years and she passed away in the 8th year. So again, let's correct that. When does he embrace Islam? In the 6th year. That's when the whole caravan event takes place. طيب. He passes away in the lifetime and the Khilafah of Abu Bakr in the 12th year after the migration. The 12th year after the migration of the Prophet ﷺ. And then finally, something about Umama. She was the very first grandchild of the Prophet ﷺ. So that's very important. Because the first grandchild has a very special bond with the grandparents. When we said the Prophet went against the cultural norms at that time because they used to give precedence or preference to male children. But he decided to sideline that, and he used to treat her as the best and the most favorite of his family. In fact, that's what he said. He says she was his favorite family member. This girl, Umama, is a favorite of the family of the Prophet to him. Why is that? Again, her grandmother is Khadija, and her mother is the very first child the Prophet had with Khadija, which is Zaynab, in this blessed household. We said her father was a nobleman in Quraysh, and he was called Al-Amin, and he was very trustworthy in his business transactions, and that's why basically they had sent him on that caravan. What was her position with the Prophet? How did he treat her? She was the most beloved of his grandchildren to him. And one of the proofs of that is the fact that he would carry her on his shoulder in salah, like we covered last week. The Prophet ﷺ one time was given a gift, and he says, I will give this gift to the favorite family member that I have. And all the girls, it was basically a necklace. So all the women, they said, is going to go to Aisha, because Aisha is what? His favorite wife. And then the Prophet ﷺ calls Umama, and he puts the necklace on her neck. Aisha says also that An-Najashi, the king of East Africa, at the time of the Prophet, had sent a gift to the Prophet ﷺ, and it was made out of gold. So he took it, but he did not wear it, and he gave it to his daughter, to his granddaughter, Umama, and she took care of it. Fatima, may Allah be pleased with her, which is the aunt of Umama, she basically requested that when I die, I want my husband to marry Umama. So that's how that marriage takes place. Now this is very interesting, because Umama now, paternally, she's from the competitive side of Quraysh against Bani Hashim. This is another thing that people don't have clarity on. They think that there was this competition before Islam between Abd Shams, the family of Abd Shams, which later on become the Umayyads, and the family of Bani Hashim, which later on become the Muttalibin, the family of Abi Talib. And this particular event actually disproves that, because after Islam they put all that ignorance to the side. And Ali ibn Abi Talib married right after his wife Fatima passes away, by her will and testament that she had left, her niece Umama, which paternally is from that lineage of Abd Shams ibn Abdi Manaf. And then when he passes away, she marries someone else, but she never had any children. And remember, that's what we said about what makes Al-Hasan and Al-Hussein special, is that they had children and progeny. And that's how the seed of the Prophet ﷺ continued. The bloodline of the Prophet continues. Whereas Umama, although she's the granddaughter, and she has a special lineage, but she did not have any children from any of her husbands. Whether it's Ali or the one that married her after Ali, which was Al-Mughira ibn Nawfal. And again, that was with the advice of Ali. He says, after I die, I wish that you accept this person in marriage. And she actually had a son for Al-Mughira ibn Nawfal. His name was Yahya, but Yahya passes away in infancy, and some say that he basically did not have any children from her either. And then she passes away. May Allah be pleased with her. And that basically is the end of that chapter of her life. So just to come back and review what we mentioned last week. Basically, we said the image or the event that we're talking about, or the illustration, is the Prophet coming into the masjid, and he has his granddaughter on his shoulder. He's carrying her, and he starts leading salah, congregational worship, in front of the community with his granddaughter on his shoulder. And whenever he would bow down, he would place her on the ground, and whenever he would stand up, he would pick her back up. And we said, what are some of the lessons that we can extract from that? We spoke about the simplicity of his life, the spontaneous nature of his life. He comes out to meet the community, and he didn't really change much about himself. He's his normal self. He's not faking it or putting on a front. And this teaches us that although there is an issue of respect, but it should not be this type of robotic protocol that many people have, like the royalty. We spoke about royalty and how, rulers and government officials, they have specific protocols that they can't even be seen with their family members. Recently, I attended a training, and the training was it was about family therapy, a non-Muslim trainer, and this was actually a bunch of imams. We were trained by him. And so I think it was from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., something like that. So after we concluded the training, we're going out from the hotel trying to check out, and we see him. Now, during the training, he's wearing a suit and tie. All of a sudden, he shows up, and I look at him. He's wearing shorts. He's wearing a baseball cap. Looks nothing like what we just witnessed, but he also has his daughter with him, because he's got his family. He's from the East Coast, and the weather was nice. We were out in Houston. So he has his family with him. So you see a different personality altogether. And that's the way people typically are. They try to separate between business and life. The Prophet now is a messenger. Part of him being a messenger was for him to be a human, and to show them that you could be a human and fulfill the rights of God. So this is specific to him. And so he showcased how he would interact with his children, and with his grandchildren, and with his spouses, and with his neighbors. All of that was seen by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this showcases the full humanity of this man. The next thing here is it said that this particular event was not only happening in the masjid, it was actually fulfilling what took place in the house before he comes out for salah. She was already playing with him, and she was bonding with him and connected with him, and he did not want to stop that. So he wanted to give her emotional fulfillment. Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And this again showcases his fatherly love and concern and compassion and empathy. Number 3, we said that the person that was on his back, on his shoulder, is a female child of his. And this actually is what, not just one female, we said it's a double female, because this is the daughter of his daughter. And he comes out in front of this whole community, in front of them, and he's trying to teach them a lesson. This is a society that definitely had issues, and they did not give due rights to women. And they used to celebrate the birth of males more than the birth of females. But the Prophet, in his lifetime, he showcases us that this is his surviving family, or all females. Those are the ones that embrace Islam. Those are his children. His progeny continues through his daughter Fatima. So he's trying to erase a lot of the ignorant features of that society and to destroy some of the ignorance that was still stuck in people's minds. And we spoke about this. Allah mentions the condition of the people at that time. وَإِذَا بُشِّرَ أَحَدُهُمْ بِالْأُنْثَى ظَلَّ وَجْهُهُ مُسْوَدًّا وَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ. When one of them is given the news of a daughter as a newborn, his face becomes dark and he becomes very angry and sad. يَتَوَارَى مِنَ الْقَوْمِ مِنْ سُوءِ مَا بُشِّرَ بِهِ أَيُمْسِكُهُ عَلَى هُونٍ أَمْ يَدُسُّهُ فِي التُّرَابِ. He hides away from people because of the bad news that he just received. Although it's what? A blessing that he just received. Does he hold this child and remain humiliated, or does he kill this child in infancy? And this was something that they had experience in, unfortunately, which is called what? Infanticide. You're killing infants in their childhood. And by the way, people think this happened in Arabia. There is millions of children that get killed in this way in many places around the world, especially in India and China today, because they have a lot of regulations. Well, in China, limiting basically the amount of children that one may have, especially in urban centers. So they have an overwhelming majority of male children, because they say a male child can help them economically and can carry the family name and so on and so forth. So they have a very bad issue there. So this problem hasn't necessarily ended. The other thing I mentioned last week was, although we mentioned this about Arabian society prior to the coming of Islam, this doesn't mean that all the women were buried alive when they were born, because that would do what? Society would expire, because you can't reproduce if you don't have women. So it wasn't all the women that were born which had that particular fate. It was only some. And then, of course, there are some stories which are fabricated into our tradition, like a famous story that says Umar ibn al-Khattab buried his daughter before Islam. That's a lie. That story is not authentic. It's a fabrication. One of the many fabrications that have crept into our history. And the point behind it, of course, is to bring down the status of Umar. So again, not everything that people say and repeat is actually accurate. Did that event happen, as in, did the Arabs prior to the coming of the Quran, some of them bury their infant daughters? Yes, they did. Allah documents that in the Quran. وَإِذَا الْمَوْءُودَةُ سُئِلَتْ بِأَيِّ ذَنْبٍ قُتِلَتْ. Allah will ask this female child who was buried in her infancy on the day of resurrection, what was the crime that caused her to be killed? Now, of course, this goes hand in hand also with abortion. This is that same conversation. What crime did this child have to be killed? And that's a huge political thing in our society. Abortion and you know, freedom of choice and freedom, or what do they call them? Pro-life and pro-choice, right? Pro-life and pro-choice. What are Muslims? That's a very important question. Muslims should not be cornered to either one of these two dichotomies. We could be this and we could be that, depending on the situation. There's no black and white answer to every single situation. But we definitely believe in the fact that something that's beyond both of these things, pro-choice and pro-life, is pro-God's laws. So God says what? Don't terminate pregnancies if there is no dire need to do so. But he also says before you get into that pregnancy, there are specific boundaries which are not to be crossed. So you shouldn't have illegitimate children to begin with. You shouldn't have these interactions that you have which cause these things. So a lot of people try to give treatment to the problem and they don't go back to the root of the problem. So Muslims have a different mindset. So we don't get stuck in these things, put you in a corner, and you got to either be blue or red. What are we? Green. Thank you, brother. Well, actually, the Prophet, green will be the clothing of the people of paradise. But in this life, the Prophet ﷺ recommended that we wear white. So white is the color of Islam. He says, أحب اللباس إليه صلى الله عليه وسلم. The most beloved clothing to him was white clothing. And he says basically, it is cleaner than other things because you can see any filth in it and you can clean it immediately. But he says, wear it and make sure that you shroud your dead with it. That's why we shroud the dead in what color? In white. So it's not just a color for the dead, but it's also the color for the living. Although in some cultures I was told that white is the color of death only. So in some parts of India, that's the case. So they don't wear white in happy occasions because it reminds them of death. Of course, in many other cultures, what is the color of death? Black. But that's not really from Islam either. That's in some people's ignorant culture. Because the Prophet used to wear black as well. Wore black, wore white. That's not an issue. There are specific colors that he said to stay away from. Number 4, it shows us the compassion of the Prophet in with this very small child. And the point behind that, again, and this is why I wanted to take us to the history of who Umama is. It is to give beautiful treatment to her mother, Zainab. Because Zainab now is going to have exponential happiness experiencing and seeing what she just saw. She's like, wow, the Prophet of God, my father, is taking my daughter into the congregation and he's not keeping her in the house. He wants to honor her and give her emotional fulfillment. So if Zainab was to ask, what happened to your daughter? She says, the Messenger of God carried her with him on his back and he took her to the masjid. So what the lesson here is that when you want to take care of your own children, also try your best to take care of their children as well. And this way, it's a continuous process. It doesn't end with your children. And we spoke about that and how some people, unfortunately, are influenced by ignorance. They say the children of daughters are not as special as the children of sons. So they give preferential treatment to their sons' children, but not their daughters' children. And the Prophet here is disproving that practice and saying that's an ignorant practice. This Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam that carried his granddaughter on his back in salah, placing her down while he's making sujood, picking her back up, which means he's doing movements. And we spoke about this issue of movement in salah and that there are exceptions to the rule. If the movement is necessary or there is a need to move, then there is no harm in doing so. And I told you as well that it's very disturbing sometimes when a parent brings their child, but they refuse to comfort the child in salah, and the child just starts shouting the whole salah, starts screaming their heads off because they're in a very strange place, and there's all these strange faces, but we are allowed to comfort them, and that's what the Prophet here was showcasing. He's comforting the child in salah. There's nothing wrong with that. The Prophet himself told us, جُعِلَتْ قُرَّةُ عَيْنِي فِي الصَّلَاةِ. My best experience in this life is during salah. We spoke briefly about Qurratul Ayn, and we said Qurratul Ayn means coolness of the eye. That's a very basic translation, but it comes from the fact that you cry 2 types of tears, tears of joy and tears of sadness. The tears of joy are cool tears, and the tears of sadness are hot tears. So when you say أَقَرَّ اللَّهُ عَيْنَكَ, it means may Allah give you this coolness of the eye, meaning joy. 1. 2, it has the meaning of you having complete satisfaction and not making comparisons. Because that's what many people have. They make comparisons, especially with their children. We compare siblings to each other. We compare children to their cousins. We compare children to their classmates. And that's a terrible way to move on. Every child is gifted in their own way. Allah blessed them to be them. Don't compare children to each other. This is a very huge thing for parents. Same thing for spouses, when you compare your spouse to somebody else, that's a failure. That's why the prayer of the righteous is what? رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ. Our Lord and Master, grant us from our spouses and our children قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ, complete satisfaction where we're so happy with them that we don't look elsewhere to compare them to anybody else. That's qurratul ayn. So that's what the Prophet told us about salah. He says salah gave him this complete satisfaction where he would not look elsewhere for any type of attention. And we know that the way he performed salah had the most khushu', because he says to the community, أَلَا إِنِّي أَعْلَمُكُمْ بِاللَّهِ وَأَتْقَاكُمْ لَهُ. I know more about God than all of you combined, and I have the most taqwa of him. And naturally he's going to have the most khushu', the most humble state in worship. But he didn't consider carrying his granddaughter to do what? To take away from his khushu'. Because that's the excuse of people. Is like, if I hold my child, that's going to remove my khushu' from me. The Prophet's style was to hold the child without removing your khushu'. It doesn't contradict it. And this showcases again the ease and the simplicity within the Sharia. We said how some of the scholars commented on this example, and they said, what will an extremist do with these types of narrations? You know, a rigid person who only sees things black and white. You can't move in salah. Okay, so what do you say about the Prophet moving? He picked her up, put her down, picked her up, put her down. In salah, what do you say about that? Is his salah invalid? His salah is valid. So you're going to get stuck. So either follow the Prophet's tradition or tell us that you have become a prophet. But don't say this is the Prophet's tradition simply by being rigid and harsh without having any knowledge. And then he finalizes and he closes this chapter by saying, in fact, one can argue very well that the Prophet here in this particular situation was actually doing two acts of worship at the same time. One act of worship is the devotion towards his Lord, performing salah, the prescribed ritual. But the other act of worship is treating generously and excellently and with compassion his daughter and his daughter's daughter. And he says both of them were combined at the same time. So may Allah be pleased with Umama. May Allah be pleased with her mother Zainab. May Allah be pleased with her father Abi As ibn al-Rabi'. May Allah have mercy on us to learn from these beautiful families and how they live their lives, and to bless us to take from the example of our beloved messenger to see how to interact with our children, with our grandchildren, with our in-laws, with our families, and with those that are around us, whether they happen to be our enemies or they happen to be our friends. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sallim. We ask Allah to bless the Messenger Muhammad, to honor and compliment him, to shower him with protection and grace, along with his family and his righteous followers. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. We ask you to give us the best of this life and the best of the next life, and to protect us from the fire. اللهم إنا نسألك رضاك والجنة ونعوذ بك من سخطك ومن النار. We ask you, Allah, for your pleasure and for the gardens of paradise, and we seek refuge in you from the fire and from your anger. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Allah is far above any imperfection. We testify that He's the only one deserving of worship. We seek His forgiveness and we repent to Him. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.